Okay, my name is Anita Lynn Bussell, Anita Bussell. B is in boy.
Great. And I'm going to have you keep
Talk
your
to
eyes
you.
on me because, yeah, I
Okay.
want that look to
Uh-huh.
happen. And can you,
And
oh, go
just
ahead.
for a person of reference and while we're going with this, my name is Anita Lynn Bussell. I am the daughter of Ozzie and Teresa Bussell and the granddaughter of Clemenita Bussell and also of Caroline and Leonard Henderson. My whole life I have lived that kind of way. I have never been just me. I have always been accountable back for my family.
What you got?
The
Oh,
glasses. He's
do you
getting a
need
lot
to
of
wear
glare.
them? Because if you don't
Is
need
that an
to,
issue?
there we go.
No, I'm not blinded.
Okay.
It just covers it up so I don't wear eye makeup. No, but they are
And so you're
bifocal.
telling me basically in that story, you're telling me a little of your genealogy, and that is your gift. That is what you do within the family. Tell
Well,
me
they
about
say
that.
that within the family, yes, but both of my sets of grandparents were born in the 1800s. This is from the older world. And I had, in particular, who I'm named after my grandma Anita Bussell. She's a dart, but it also comes back for having that story to tell. She made sure I knew who I was and especially who my relatives were due to the genealogy of stuff. But it's just sort of like that. I've packed that. I spent most of my life, not my most recent years, but I grew up around the elders. And the elders were always good to telling who I was and where I came from. And then I became one of those people that was asking questions. And a lot of times people don't answer questions, but in particular, they knew I wanted to know, so it was shared. And it's taken on a new form of, yeah, family historian. Um, it's been brought up. Yes, I am a Mattole descendant and I am an HUPA descendant. We are here on the South Fork River of the Trinity River. We are in Aboriginal HUPA land based territory. Um, Along with for having that story to be told, I am not an HOO Hoopa tribal certified federal government member. I am through the genocide, like my brother has pointed out earlier, is I am of the enrolled, proud to say, enrolled Yurok tribal member. My mother is a Bear River Mattole who is a part of the Bear River Wiyot tribe, and she also is federally recognized. And in Indian country, there is that importance that plays a part of being recognized as being federally recognized. And so here in California, there's a lot of, including my 95-year-old aunt, who is not federally recognized, and I have on my dad's side, and my dad was one half HUPA Hoopa, and he was never ever, and he left this world 23 years ago, and he was never federally recognized, and nor was his parents. And that's just history type that packs it back through. We're here for the 64 flood, and I get carried away.
No, it's good. And can you tell me, because the town of Hoopa, HOOPA, is spelled that way. When did that happen? When were there two?
Well, it, it's like saying this is Hoopa country. And the soldiers came in the 1800s, and for the miners that were the biggest type of line was kill, burn, get rid of the Indians. That's why we are here, where village sites were down here on the canyon side, gathering areas. It was known for having it. Famous for up in this area was for a lot of acorns. But again, we are 12, 15 miles from the res, and down here at the intersection of the rivers was a village. The old highway 299 Caltrans was very blatant to take their road and ram it right through the middle of the village. I have family members who do have a picture of where the village used to be because they became on they're my relatives on the Indian side, and they married in with some of those Caltrans people that wiped out a village last year, and lo and behold, the 64 flood did not go to where that village was.
Do we need to fix that?
No, I have hand placement. Oh,
Don't touch.
sorry.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, 64 flood, and when it came up and where it went, you can see from knowing where it was the villages were built above, for the most part, with the flooding was above those lines. The 64 flood, the 55 flood, I was born in 1952. As far as memory goes for the 55 flood, but both of those floods, it had to do with the high creeks. It wasn't just the river. The river did the thing, but the creeks were the part of it. So in 1983, and where I was living on the river was, I just became a widow. And in particular, my brother Tim's, they came to check me out on the river. And it was just like saying, the creeks aren't flooding. This isn't like 64. The other scenario was snow. Not as much. No, the rains weren't, but it was watch the creeks and the 64 flood. And I just had my family teaching how much of being aware, where the mountains have shifted from across the river, from right here where we are at here on the South Fork. Major mountains crashed. And the Great Roar. But to a kid, so what? The excitement. I didn't hear anybody mention earlier is about for helicopters. That was they existed and did travel through. My aunt in Hoopa had to get helicoptered out. I remember all of my family questioning her about because it was because of health reasons, but she closed her eyes and the whole way to Eureka. Didn't see anything, which would have been the rest of us to have died for, to see the markings in having it. There in Hoopa in particular were the great gullies and the washout. And we will see because one of the huge big washout creeks that came through there, and they're building apartments there right now, where it's the old creek beds that I will be concerned. As mentioned, where money and denial, and up the Douglas City, where there used to be, and people still complain about, I'm one of those people, give us back our water from the Trinity River, along with for the drought. And I've lived my entire life, and the 64 flood also put that back into perspective, was because this was all supposed to be recreation land for Southern California, and so a dead river can be a dammed river, and a dead river is with no fish. And I'm native, I'm a weaver, and I'm a fish eater. And so for us to be affected by the river didn't wipe out the fish, but the rest of the world has. A lot of logging. We had a lot of logging mills, and 64 flood did do some changes. In particular in Hoopa, Supply Creek, major, where there used to be a lot of the housing. Just I know from my friends and family to talk about Fort Washington there. I'm jumping all over the place. Gonna jump with it for you to ask questions.
Well, I'll go back through some of the questions that I have then. Can you tell me about your tribe's relationships to the river? Again, there's that idea of the upriver, downriver. I mean, I've heard that Yurok people, rather than using cardinal points, use upriver and downriver as directional points because it's such a huge part of their being, that river. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, we are right now in the upriver Hoopa section. When the Trinity River changes off in the South Fork, so it depends upon where your location is when you were talking to somebody. And if I was down there at Klamath and I'm heading up the river, when I'm in Klamath country, they're going to think I'm going up the river towards Orleans. They're going to know me. And those that know me know I'm heading back up South Fork. But it's, again, for the distinction of where they're having it. So it's pretty general terms saying up the river and down the river and where I'm going down the river to. Pulikla. And so it depends upon, that means downriver in New York people, and they come from down the river. When you're saying down the river, if they're already at the mouth, they're down the river. So you need to know who you're talking to. My brother will come up with that much more with language and determining, but with identity. Talking to some white person that's insignificant about for location is different than talking with somebody that is directly in Hoopa. And it's like saying, I'm heading up the river. I'm heading up the Klamath, or I'm heading up the Trinity. They're from up the river. Are we talking about? So, you know, and then there's Wintun that are up the river. And so there's other tribes.
I wonder too, I mean, if that's something, you know, that white people came along and, you know, sometimes names come from that,
But
not understanding and labeling.
Well, definitely for communication and with language. Native languages are very descriptive. I never did speak it, but I took enough classes in Spanish to know that it's very descriptive, and what your subject is and what you are in English, and what you describe in English that isn't there. And so it's being very much more descriptive. And so when people do a part of deciphering and doing a description about it, a lot of things get lost. I just think this time and again, and my first thing is popping into my head is when we were over in Yellowstone back in the 80s and Devil's Tower. That isn't what it means in native language. That's what it means when somebody was doing an interpretation. When Devil's Canyon, I mean, they come up with a lot of devil, and that isn't what the native language was a description of. And those are other places. Same here on the, when they talk about Devil's Backbone, right. Mountain description. But you know, that's some other person's English language that is now trying to, and who is doing the description.
And I mean, devil is such a,
it's the wicked world that takes it, yeah.
Right, it's, having to deal with, Catholicism or,
you got it.
Religion is, yeah. Yeah.
Just so long as you know it, I mean, no insult, but that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
But again, for on language, and it's just like in a tone of a voice, or how people talk, how people get lost up into this modern world of, I'm not into Facebook, I do a little bit of email, and it's very dangerous, and it's how fast people can type things out and not even know what their consequences are going to be. I didn't mean it that way. And I know about for on joking, and joking how much, and I had said something when I was at service station the other day, and I seen a friend, and I said something, and she snapped back at me. I was like, oh, wait a second, you didn't let me finish the rest of the story. And when I told her the rest of it, oh, I was like, again, just
Email's
joking.
A dangerous thing. I agree with you. We just were talking about that on the way up here, about this whole email thing that started and then blew up, and because people don't, they don't think about what it would feel like to have those things said to them like that in an email, because they don't get to ask questions.
Yeah.
They say, well, what did you mean by that? They just go, well, I know what they meant by that, and and then it just blows
Well,
all
that's
up.
the same as the gossip that does the repeating.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about for the water, and we talk about for the high water and the 64 flood, before the Trinity Dam, up the South Fork, seals used to come clear up here. Seals don't even come to Witchpeck anymore. Seals follow with the fish and eels. South Fork used to be very famous, and I keep looking over here because that's where the river is. Used to be very famous for its different life that it had in the waters, and the different things that now get done to the water and where they aren't there. The mouths of creeks are very, very important. The cleaning that was done from when the waters came down, and about for survival that came back afterwards.
So that brings up a question, something that came up when we talked to the Fish and Wildlife Services about the purposes of flood. That flood is, we think about if you're in a low-lying area and your house get wiped out, you think it's a bad thing, and of course it is for you, but that they really had a purpose in nature and the cycles of nature. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, my interpretation and where mine comes back for having with it. And I'm a basket weaver. And we need high water to clean out the bugs from the sticks. And in 1977 was a really drought time. Since 1977, and it depends on where I go to collect my sticks and what type of sticks, but we will talk about sticks that come from the creeks. And a very famous, important gathering area for willow sticks was up at Douglas City and the Indian Creek up here on the Trinity River. It no longer, the willows are still there. They no longer sticks for picking sticks because the sticks need to be cleaned by the water. It takes the bugs, it cleans the bugs out of the sticks. It takes and it scrapes back all the stuff and they will come up stronger. Okay, as a weaver, we will also talk about when we gather roots and where the roots come from. And so with the cleaning and for the high waters, that does its mark for cleaning back. But now there are Himalaya blackberries that are not native to here, that have done their thing, and if the rivers to come and clean them back, the high waters to clean them back, whether on the creek or on a river, will clean back those so that they will go away, because if you go in there and start getting your roots, they look the same until you snap them into realizing it. And as a weaver, everything my weaving and the weaving around here, I can't talk about weavers all over this world, but anyway, it goes through this mouth. So we have to talk about chemicals, and we have to talk about the cleaning, and so that with the water to cleaning it, and strong relationship is with the waters and how it comes back. So the cleaning of the creeks and the cleaning of the river is a necessity as a part of a weaver. And we had a good joke amongst weavers about we're going to have to start burning our willows to get rid of the bugs. And the thing is about this beautiful, nice, strong stick until you pop it in two, and then there'll be little holes in it because it was on a weevil that was on the inside of the stick. So picking sticks was fine. Oh, look at my big bundle I have, until I got ready to soak it and weave it, and it'd be full of bugs or holes from bugs. So and you can't just weave with anything, and it's got to be a strong stick for whatever it's going to carry its life with.
Do you have any, I don't know if you know this story, but somebody was telling me, it was Ralphie Peters was telling me a story about acorn rocks being an area where acorn rocks were collected and then being washed away, and so they weren't available anymore. Do you know anything about that?
No, I can't say what he was talking about, but I will tell you, as an acorn, there's different ways in this modern world of 2014 that people will cook acorns. But one of the ways is cooking it with acorn rocks. And yes, there are places that you would be knowing to go. You can't just go gather rocks any place. A cooking rock is a very special rock, and it has a very special look to it, let alone its purpose of knowing for having its size and everything. And yeah, I'm sure water would have taken it away. And again, for when you take it and where the cooking with the family, but it's the same as for where you would go for on your grinding. And so this river that is so super low and sad, of where rivers used to be and where rivers have went. And the other thing is about for high water is how fast did it come in and go. The 64 flood was gushing and did a lot of damage, and a lot of that I think came from civilization, so as to taking some of the marking of with it. But yeah, the creek beds changed, beaches, and that's one of the thing about for watching the river. How fast was there sand? How much was there silt? And how much was there left with rock? Depends on if the river was slow, fast, and gushing. So.
That's great.
And the one thing I wanted to bring up was that because of the lumber mills and where the mills were and the pollution and what the river did, and a lot of mills were on the river, and that was a thing. And again, back as a weaver and being affected by it, that they don't talk about. And there's some of the pictures I've seen. My goodness, the Eel River and the mills, and they put to their log piles was, and how they used to transport down was a lot of mercury, a lot of pollution that left it for us Indians that had to touch things.
Let's see. Boy, you covered a lot. How about community coming together during?
Oh, good, yeah. One of the things, and I hadn't heard them mention, my dad and the people before him and his family was very much that I will say came from an old world of training and about people and keeping track of people. They had a generator. And I want to say, I have to look over here at my mom, it was with Les, but they would put a generator in the truck and they went around and they charged up people's freezers. Yes, over there at my grandparents' and where they didn't stay and what the people had done. But they went around to other people, making sure that it was taken care of. And my biggest excitement, I said, was the best Christmas ever was the Christmas of the '64 flood. It wasn't about the gifts. I think I got, before the variety store had gotten flooded out, because we did go down there to Red Creek and we couldn't go Christmas shopping in Eureka before. A deck of cards, and I got me the longest tailed sock cap that came, that was like the best gift around. But the community we had, and that's why I said Grandma Ammon's, Ruth Ammon's house. When we talk about just up the road, that's all my dad's relatives, but they grew up here next to my mom's family was the first family that came into this section of the mountain, and it was a miner. This was an old mining claim. But along with when that Matol woman that came over the mountain, and she came here to this place and became a camp cook, and they later had children. One of their daughters married in the land and the family, and that's how the Ammons got family land up there, but turned out to be the small hub of who's related to who. But anyway, Grandma Ammon, Ruth's place, was the congregation place. It was right alongside the road. The house is still up the road, kind of like looking like a log cabin, but we all were there for Christmas. Other relatives that are up the mountain, everybody that could work its way through, we came there, and it was feasting. It was about food and laughter, and they let us kids have one of the rooms. No such thing as dealing with TV. Who could care less, and how it went with. Shani was probably the baby in the crowd, and she might have been about 6 or 7 months old. And then we had up to the teenagers. The backside of Grandma Ammon Ruth's house was a huge big hill that was famous for, and there was the horses and the cows on the backside of the barn. Sloping to, you'd think we were the greatest, no, not skiing, but sledding, like a toboggan. My brother, we have a field of cars. My dad was a tow truck man. My dad had a wrecking yard, and there was a lot of cars. Ammons collect cars. I'm sure if you go to most Indian homes, you'll see cars, leftovers or broke down, and as it turns out. And so Tim and Frank, maybe Tim, Frank, and Gordon, but they took those windshields out, and oh my gosh, could we skid down that hill on that ice? Because the snow would be so smooth, and I know to going up, and my cousin Ronnie and I were just about the same age, and I know that we were a team. And I know that we would have teams on who could go down faster. And I know how fast we could shoot down, and I know how fast we could bounce in the air and how to bounce them. But I know that Grandma Ammon came out there, chewed us kids all out when she saw and what we were up to and what was going on, because she was like, when that wind chill breaks, you kids are picking up every single bit of it because of the animals. When the snow melts, going to be stuck with all that glass. And I just have to laugh about it, and Tim to share in the stories. And no, we never got that far, but it was one of those things where, yeah, we're out for the day. Community-wise is that, you know, the community looked after one another. My dad and Les, who was just one of the Ammons that was up there, but for work, and for them to keeping the road open and stuff. The other neighborhoods kept track of what the kids were doing and where we were at. I heard them up this way. I heard them over there. They're back up that way, or they all headed out that way. We didn't always stay in quite the group. I was one but a through. There was 3 of us girls. There were several of the boys. There wasn't a lot of us, but it was like for us to go on having it. And I just know, like, for being able to ride around, they had donkeys and the horses. And the community was my relatives. And so we were big family oriented. But I just say that my dad, and to go out and take a generator and to go down the hill, this was one hub. I grew up with them always saying, you South Fork people are different. My mom has the next generation, you South Fork people, because we take that stand. But it takes a community to raise a child, and I grew up in a community. And that's what I wanted to bring back, that my dad that had carried this older way of with the community. My mom has put that into instill, and for us to going back with it. And we had a point of taking care of one another, because if you're going to die over there because you starved to death, it's going to be my fault too. So let's take care of each other. And that isn't always the way it comes back. I call it an old world teaching. It's not a new world teaching, and it's not everybody thinks that way now. And we've had some training stories since the '64 flood to pay attention. And the biggest one, I worked for 25 years for the tribal health medicine. You better keep a stockpile. You don't have to keep a lot. You better be prepared, and you better know what you're carrying, because that my aunt with the helicopter, and one of those stories is because of people that were so body dependent on it. I heard some pretty doozer stories about for the medications to come in, and when the medications didn't, and for people being last minute to not be prepared.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think it's important. I mean, I think one of the stories out of this film, and I think you'll find when you watch that Great White Encounter is, I mean, we tend to, I think we're all interested in what works for people, what worked, what helped, what made things better. And I think that sense of community is a real part of the story. I mean, it was a part of the story in the Eel River Valley where people took care of each other, where stores, when you were completely wiped out and you went to the store and they extended credit to you. I mean, I think these are things we need to be thinking about always, is these things, the positive things.
Okay, in 1983, and I laugh with my dad, and I'm trying to think of when another time was that happened with it. And maybe it was another high water, but without the power. We've had a few other of those episodes, but oh gosh. I think about the high water was coming up around my brother Tim's house, and my dad and I went to the grocery. I think took me to the grocery store. The people, the laughter, the talking about it, and you can go and they're like, can be really mean, rude, and mouthy people. But during time of disaster, hey, how you guys doing over there? You guys got enough candles or whatever that is? Do you have the wood? Well, my dad and I, we had gone to get some to the store, visited and laughed. Then we came across the other side of the river because we wanted to look and I used to be really into cameras and taking pictures, and so was my dad. And it was just like so that we could talk about it later for where the high water was. And different people that took pictures from the 64 flood was that same kind of thing. It just was a flashback about for having laughter, sense of humor, lighten up. We're going to get through this. It isn't going to last forever. And how are you doing? Okay. And if there was a picture of a camera to come out, and I just had heard about for other people that had that same thing. After the 64 flood, the same as that other high water of 83, was the effects. It was like over here where my house is how that water that was washed out 2 years after that, my cousin and I scaled down the mountain to go swimming. And there were still the leftovers from where it was so wiped out. I'm jumping around, but I just know that when we got down there to the river, then we couldn't get back. But risk our lives going down this, looked like it was a hard, rocky thing to going down, but it didn't cave down in on us. Well, it's the same thing when it comes back for people that can bring that back to a good time and remember, oh, I remember when you came by. Hey, thank you again for when you did this for me. It carried strong, and I can sure, because I was going to say that from some of my friends' stories to telling me about what it was like down there at the mouth, literally wiped out. And a couple, 10 years ago, the Klamath had filled up so much and everybody was blocked out and they couldn't get back up the cove. And I happened to be staying in Crescent City. I happened to be in a life that was like we moteled it and pretended we were tourists because we could not get through because it was
We'll
flooded.
make the best of it, huh?